Imagine, if you will, spending 5 entire years of your life meticulously building a masterpiece,
Right.
day by day, just, hour by hour. You are carefully placing every brick, navigating constant dangers, surviving by the absolute skin of your teeth.
Yeah, a massive grind.
Exactly. You invest thousands of hours into this singular creation, and then you make one single microscopic misstep.
Oh, man.
Yeah. In the span of about 2 seconds, your character dies, the world permanently locks you out, and 5 years of your life are just entirely gone, deleted.
It's brutal.
Now imagine that this exact moment of devastating, irreversible failure is the precise thing that catapults you to international fame.
It sounds completely contradictory, honestly. I mean,
Mhm.
we're conditioned to believe that we're rewarded for our ultimate triumphs, right?
Right, for crossing the finish line.
Exactly. We don't usually expect the total collapse of half a decade of work to be the very thing that makes the mainstream media suddenly care about who we are.
It's wild. It completely upends how we think about success, narrative, and, most importantly, identity.
It really does.
And that bizarre friction point is exactly what we're going to explore today. So, welcome back to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
And I am doing what I do best, and I have to tell you, the listener, I deep dive for a living. I literally deep dive for 12, 15 hours straight sometimes.
You really do.
I spent the last 15 hours straight completely locked in the research cave, doing nothing but tracing the threads of this exact phenomenon to prepare this bespoke exploration just for you.
It's quite the stack of sources today.
It is. This will be a full deep dive into the man that is Feelish and who he was, how he started to now.
Yeah, through an incredible stack of sources.
We are talking internet chat transcripts, global musical histories, dense forensic legal dossiers, and even coronial inquests.
Heavy stuff.
Yeah, we're going to look at who these individuals were, figures like Phil, Philphi, PH1LZA, and even Philippa. But here's the thing, this isn't just a biographical list.
No, not at all. The through line connecting all these disparate lives is much more profound. We're really examining the intense and sometimes violent collision between the avatars we create and the real world we inhabit.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. We build these digital personas, these alternate versions of ourselves, and we project them out into the ether. But eventually, the digital ghost always bumps into the physical machine.
The physical machine, that is such a perfect way to frame it.
Thanks.
How do our stage names and our digital footprints interact with the gritty, often unforgiving physical realities of the world? To kick things off, we are going to look at the most literal survival story in the digital realm.
Let's do it.
A story where the avatar and the human behind it were moving in absolute lockstep. Let's talk about the tale of Phil Watson.
Known to millions online as PH1LZA.
Exactly.
It's the perfect starting point, really, because it represents the most organic, unfiltered type of digital identity.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, Phil Watson wasn't the highly calculated, algorithm-chasing content creator. When he started, he was just a guy with a hobby.
Right. He described himself as a part-time streamer.
Yeah, he put out videos of the things he built and experienced in the video game Minecraft, and he was explicitly clear that he didn't care about view counts or, subscriber metrics.
The primary goal was just personal enjoyment.
Exactly.
But we have to explain the specific, incredibly stressful nature of how he was playing this game.
Oh, definitely.
Because it's the entire crux of his identity. He wasn't just casually building houses in a creative sandbox. He was playing Minecraft in what is called hardcore mode.
Which is unforgiving.
Completely. Now, for anyone listening who isn't intimately familiar with the mechanics of Minecraft under the hood, hardcore mode is exactly what the name implies.
It is the absolute highest difficulty setting in the game.
Yeah. But the real mechanical kicker, the thing that changes the entire psychological profile of the experience, is that you only get one life. Permadeath.
Right, the stakes are absolute. I mean, in a standard game, if you fall off a cliff or a monster gets you, you simply respawn in your bed, right?
Yeah, you maybe lose a few items and you try again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in hardcore mode, the enemies deal significantly more damage, the environment is inherently less forgiving, and if your health bar drops to 0, that is the end of the line.
It's over.
The game permanently locks the world. You're reduced to a spectator. You cannot ever interact with that world again. Every single block you placed, every resource you gathered is effectively gone forever.
And his early attempts at surviving this mode were spectacularly relatable failures.
Oh yeah, they really were.
According to the early transcripts of his streams, his very first hardcore world lasted exactly one in-game day.
One day.
He simply wasn't prepared for the night cycle. The sun went down, the monster spawned, and he was instantly wiped out.
Classic rookie mistake.
Totally.
Yeah.
His second attempt was significantly better, though. He managed to survive for about a year.
A year's huge.
It is. But he didn't lose that world to a monster. He lost it because his physical hard drive died.
Oh, wow. The physical machine broke the digital world.
Exactly. He freely admits he was, in his own words, an idiot who hadn't backed up his data.
Those early failures, though, they're crucial to understanding the psychology of what came next. They represent the steep learning curve of the game, sure.
Yeah.
But they also highlight the fragility of digital existence. A power surge, a corrupted drive, a single lapse in judgment, and the avatar ceases to exist.
It's terrifying, honest.
But those failures set the stage for his magnum opus, the world that would eventually come to completely define the digital avatar of PH1LZA.
Yes, his legendary 5-year run. For 5 continuous, uninterrupted years of his real human life, he survived inside this one single Minecraft hardcore world.
It's mind-boggling.
The statistics he accumulated are genuinely staggering to comprehend. Over those 5 years in this purely digital space, his avatar walked 6,316 kilometers. Think about the sheer time investment required to hold down a directional key for over 6,000 kilometers.
Just walking?
Yeah, and he flew countless more using in-game items. He built massive monuments, cleared oceans, and survived thousands of close calls.
If we break down the psychology of what is happening between the creator and the audience here, it's a masterclass in tension.
Oh, absolutely.
The audience tuning into his Twitch streams wasn't just casually watching someone play a video game. They were participating in a long-form, high-stakes tightrope walk.
Every single time he logged in.
Yeah, whether he was just farming wheat or fighting a dragon, there was the genuine, ever-present mathematical possibility that half a decade of meticulous work could vanish, just because of a misplaced step or a sudden enemy spawn.
It's the ultimate parasocial investment.
Exactly. That level of prolonged shared anxiety makes the character of PH1LZA deeply tethered to his audience's daily lives.
They grew up alongside this world.
They did. They knew the geography of a place that didn't physically exist as well as they knew their own neighborhoods.
But wait, I'm struggling with the logic of the media's reaction here.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, he spends 5 years meticulously surviving, right? He achieves something monumental within the specific ecosystem of the game. But nobody in the mainstream media cares.
Right.
The BBC isn't calling him on year 4 to congratulate him on building a really nice digital castle.
No, they definitely weren't.
But then he makes a mistake. He is swarmed by a very specific, rare enemy.
A baby zombie wearing enchanted armor.
Yes, accompanied by a spider. And he panics. He makes a mechanical error with his healing items, and he dies. The 5-year run is over. He loses everything.
It's heartbreaking to watch.
It is. And that is the moment that makes him famous. Shouldn't the media reward the unprecedented success, not the devastating failure?
It feels backwards, doesn't it? But it actually makes perfect psychological and narrative sense when you understand how human beings consume stories.
Okay, break that down for me.
The 5 years of survival built the tension. But survival itself is a steady state. It's static. Mainstream media doesn't know how to report on guy continues to not die in a video game.
Huh, that's true.
But the sudden, irreversible death, that provides narrative climax. It provides catharsis.
So it translates the niche gaming achievement into a universal human emotion.
Precisely. Everyone understands loss. Everyone understands the heartbreak of putting your soul into a project and watching it shatter.
Right.
It wasn't just a gaming achievement anymore. It was a profoundly human story of grief and shock after immense dedication. Polygon wrote a massive feature on the death. PC Gamer picked it up, and then, exactly as you noted, the BBC reached out.
His reaction to the sudden mainstream spotlight is incredible, too. He was completely bewildered.
I would be, too.
Right. He went from 2,000 subscribers to 200,000 practically overnight. He transitioned from a part-time hobbyist to a full-time, highly lucrative career in the blink of an eye.
Insane growth.
There's this fantastic moment in the transcript where he says, "It's like the one moment in my life I wished I had a manager."
Oh, that's hilarious.
He's just a guy sitting in his room, suddenly fielding press inquiries from national broadcasters. His own family didn't even understand it.
Really?
Yeah, someone in the chat named Janice remarks that the whole situation was bemusing at first. Phil recounts how he would casually mention to his parents, "Oh yeah, I'm doing a BBC interview today," and they were completely baffled.
They had no idea.
They were like, "What? What is this about? Why do they care about your computer game?
What is beautiful about the FH1LZA story is the absolute parity between the avatar and the human. The persona wasn't a mask. He was just Phil Watson's surviving a digital landscape.
Exactly.
When the avatar suffered its ultimate tragedy, the real Phil Watson reaped the ultimate physical and financial rewards because the authenticity of the grief and the experience was undeniable.
The digital ghost died, but it successfully fed the physical machine.
Well said.
Okay, so that establishes our baseline. That is what happens when an avatar is a direct, authentic reflection of the creator.
Right.
But what happens when the algorithm demands the exact opposite? What happens when the only way to survive and thrive online is to build a toxic alter ego?
Oh boy.
A persona designed explicitly to shock, repulse, and confuse that eventually completely consumes your real life. That brings us to George Miller.
We're pivoting now from the authentic survivor to the engineered provocateur. The digital identity spectrum shifts dramatically here.
Let's trace George Kusunoki Miller's origins because they are so fascinatingly normal before they become surreal.
They really are.
Born in Osaka, Japan, to an Australian father and a Japanese mother, he attends an international school in Kobe, the Canadian Academy. He eventually moves to the United States to study at the New York Institute of Technology.
Very standard trajectory so far.
Yeah, and his very first footprint on the internet, the earliest archaeological dig we can do on his identity, is wonderfully pure. It's from 2006 on a YouTube channel called Too Cool for Your 92.
It's almost poignant in retrospect looking at that.
It is.
The only video on that channel features a 13-year-old Miller breakdancing in what appears to be a school hallway. It is the raw, innocent beginning of a kid just experimenting with a camera and an audience.
But the innocence doesn't last. In 2011, the internet begins to morph, and Miller conceptualizes the character of Filthy Frank.
Right.
Miller himself explicitly described Filthy Frank as the anti-vlogger of YouTube. Across multiple channels, Disaster Music, TV Filthy Frank, and Too Damn Filthy, he engineered an entire chaotic, deeply offensive universe of characters.
To truly understand how this happened, we have to look at the mechanisms of the YouTube algorithm in the early 2010s.
Right, it was a very different landscape.
This was an era where the platform was heavily incentivizing engagement at any cost.
Yeah.
Shock humor, extreme reactions, and boundary-pushing content were the most lucrative currencies available.
That algorithm rewarded chaos because chaos kept viewers clicking.
Precisely. Miller recognized this architecture and built a universe perfectly optimized to exploit it. The Filthy Frank universe was defined by aggressive surrealism, physically repulsive challenges, and offensive comedy hip-hop.
It was a lot to take in.
He played multiple oddball characters, but the most prominent was Pink Guy, an entity that literally wore a full-body, skin-tight pink lycra suit.
And we have to emphasize the sheer scale of the cultural impact this chaos generated. This was not just a niche corner of internet weirdness. It bled massively into mainstream global culture.
Oh, absolutely.
The sources confirm a mind-bending fact. Miller, operating through this chaotic, offensive universe, is the person who actually popularized the Harlem Shake meme in 2013.
It's crazy to think about.
He initiated the viral trend that directly drove the commercial success of Bauer's song, pushing it to the top of the charts globally.
And it wasn't just memes. As Pink Guy, he didn't just make joke videos. He released full-length comedy rap albums.
Real albums.
Yeah. His album Pink Season debuted at number 70 on the Billboard 200. We're talking about a character in a pink lycra suit screaming absurd, highly offensive lyrics about trap dumplings. And it is charting on the official Billboard charts right next to mainstream pop stars.
It's a testament to his understanding of internet mechanics, but it came with an excruciatingly high cost. This is where the friction between the digital avatar and the physical body becomes impossible to ignore.
And frankly, dangerous.
Wait, let's unpack that. How does making YouTube videos cause neurological damage? I understand maybe getting a bit burned out, but you're talking about severe physical consequences.
Because it wasn't just talking to a camera. The Filthy Frank persona required intense physical exertion.
What kind of exertion?
Constant screaming that was actively destroying his vocal cords, consuming repulsive things for shock value, just pushing his body into states of high stress. Miller suffered from stress-induced seizures.
Oh my God, seizures!
Yes. His physical body was literally rebelling against the digital avatar he had created to house his consciousness. The demands of the audience and the algorithm required him to be constantly on, constantly offensive, and constantly escalating.
And he was very aware of the psychological split, too. He was incredibly explicit about the separation between himself and these characters.
Yeah, he never saw them as him.
He stated clearly that Pink Guy wasn't him. He said, I guess that's the difference. Joji's just me. He recognized that the avatar was a parasite.
And so, in late 2017, he executed one of the most remarkable pivots in modern internet history. The entire Filthy Frank universe came to an abrupt, screeching halt.
Just like that.
In December 2017, he released a statement explaining that he had to cease all production of the comedy channels due to serious health conditions and a complete, overwhelming lack of interest in continuing the show.
Wow.
He elaborated in a BBC Radio 1 interview that it wasn't a creative choice. He had no option. His health dictated the death of the avatar.
But the death of Filthy Frank was the birth of Joji. He completely shed that toxic, chaotic skin and transitioned into creating serious, melancholic alt R&B and trip-hop music under the name Joji.
Which is simply the Japanese pronunciation of his given name, George.
Exactly. And the contrast in the art is just mind-blowing. You go from Pink Guy screaming absolute obscenities to Joji delivering the deep, heartbreaking sincerity of tracks like Slow Dancing in the Dark.
The whiplash is real.
And the success of this authentic self eclipsed even the shock humor.
The statistics bear that out. He signed with the label 88 Rising. His albums Ballads 1 and Nectar both peaked at number 3 on the Billboard 200.
Huge.
His track Glimpse of Us peaked at number 8 on the Billboard Hot 100 and hit number 1 on the ARIA charts in Australia. This wasn't just a genre shift. It was a desperately necessary shedding of an identity for the sake of real-world physical survival.
He had to kill the avatar that was making him famous?
Because the avatar was killing George Miller.
It is a profound artistic catharsis. He took absolute control of his narrative by abandoning the very thing the algorithm rewarded.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have seen an avatar that perfectly mirrored reality in Minecraft, and we've seen an avatar that had to be destroyed to save the physical body.
Right.
But what happens when a creator uses a highly explicit, gritty, and aggressive persona, not just for shock comedy, but to wage a literal legal war against the state?
This is where the interactions between our digital footprints and our physical realities become intensely, undeniably dangerous.
We're going to transition to Australia now to examine our next feel, a man who calls himself Philfi.
Okay.
And to understand Philfi, if you're listening, we cannot just look at his online output in a vacuum. We have to understand the specific cultural mechanisms of the Australian hip-hop scene.
Because he operates squarely within its DNA.
Exactly. The medium is just as important as the message here.
If you trace Australian hip-hop back to its roots, you hit the early 1980s. The sources highlight the pivotal 1982 broadcast of the Buffalo Gals music video on a television program called Sound Unlimited.
Oh, I've heard of that broadcast.
Yeah, this broadcast was a cultural catalyst. It inspired teenagers across the country to start breakdancing and experimenting with the form. By 1987, you see the release of the first Australian hip-hop record by a group called Mighty Big Crime.
But it didn't stay as just a stylistic imitation of American culture, did it?
No.
As the genre evolved in Australia, it became a vital, powerful, and necessary platform for marginalized voices, particularly Indigenous Australians. The music became a tool for visibility.
Absolutely.
We see pioneers like MC Opie in the early 90s and artists like Munkamuck, who is frequently touted as the grandfather of Indigenous hip-hop.
Yeah, Munkamuck is a legend.
He utilized the art form not just for entertainment, but for community-based educational projects like Desert Rap, reaching into remote areas.
And as the culture matured, it developed a razor-sharp political edge. Heavyweight artists began using the music to force incredibly uncomfortable conversations onto the national stage.
Like who?
Take Briggs, a Yorta Yorta man. When he released his album Shep Life in 2014, he was explicit about his intentions. He stated his goal was not to beat around the bush. He wanted to make a track that was deliberately in your face, a track that would make the listener physically squirm.
Wow, that's powerful.
The music journalist Lee Monroe observed that these artists are using their growing notoriety to put social inequality, systemic abuse, and racism directly on the table.
Hip-hop in this context isn't just music. It is a documentary tool. It is a mechanism for political resistance.
Exactly.
Look at D.O.B.Y., an Aboriginal Filipino rapper. He uses his music to directly, forcefully address the 2015 death in custody of David Dungay.
Huge case.
D.O.B.Y.'s lyrics don't deal in metaphor. They deal in raw accusation. He raps, "No wonder our people do not trust the system. Over 400, not one conviction."
Shame. It's just so direct.
He is taking the family's agonizing fight for justice, a fight where the traditional legal frameworks have seemingly failed them, and vocalizing it over a beat. He is using the avatar of a rapper to bypass the media filters.
That is the exact crucible that produces our next subject. Into this highly charged, documentary-style musical landscape steps Philip James Simpson.
Operating under the aliases Phil-Fi or Filthy Phil.
Right. His style is intensely underground, abrasive, and vehemently anti-establishment. And the sources have provided us with a truly fascinating artifact that shows how he constructs this persona.
The Gemini lyrics.
Yes, we have access to a set of lyrics generated by an artificial intelligence, Gemini, which was acting as a co-writer or sounding board for Philfi to construct what is titled an anti-AFP rap.
An anti-Australian federal police rap.
Yes, a song specifically targeting the Australian Federal Police.
Let's break down the mechanics of this rap, because it's not just unstructured anger, it is highly calculated.
Very much so.
Gemini was instructed to mark into its memory Filthy's signature structural flow, which is mathematically referred to as 20 by 3 by 4.
Yes, the architecture of the song is deliberate. 20 by 3 by 4 translates to 3 distinct verses, each consisting of exactly 20 bars, separated by a recurring 4-bar chorus.
That's a lot of bars.
It is a relentless, driving structure designed to deliver maximum lyrical density without letting the listener breathe.
And the lyrics themselves.
Yeah.
While they are a blistering, hyper-specific indictment of the police state, it is not generic, anti-police bravado.
No, it's very targeted.
The rap accuses the AFP of incredibly specific corruption. It talks about them rolling up in unmarked cars, deliberately wiping body cam footage to hide assaults, planting evidence like meth in old clothes, and guarding the banks while actively brutalizing the working class.
The chorus literally labels the police the biggest cartel in the whole town.
The language is meant to be confrontational. Listen to the construction of these lines. You kick in the hinges and shatter the glass, then you write up a charge just to cover your ass.
It's intense.
The song accuses the federal authorities of operating a massive racket out of Canberra, trafficking weapons, and actively pushing whistleblowers into early graves.
But here's where I have to pause and ask you to clarify the reality of this.
Sure.
When Phil Fiak is spitting these incredibly specific bars about unmarked cars, fake warrants, and surveillance vans parked outside his ex's house, how are we supposed to interpret that?
That's the big question.
How much of this is the expected, exaggerated hip-hop bravado, the need to sound tough and connected to the streets, and how much is a literal journalistic diary of his actual life?
That ambiguity is the absolute core of the friction point. In the underground hip-hop scene, authenticity, or at least the perception of it, is the only currency that matters.
Right.
The sources detail how heavily influenced the scene is by artists like Cursor and Bliss and Eso. There is an interview with a young artist named Riley P. that illuminates this beautifully.
Yeah, Riley P.
Riley P. talks about how the word-of-mouth, raw, underground culture in Darwin was so powerful and compelling that it made him abandon his dreams of becoming a WWE wrestler just to pursue rap.
Wow, that's quite a career pivot.
It is all about street narratives. So when Philfi utilizes the exact same cultural mechanisms as an artist like D.O.B.B.Y., we have to assume he is documenting his perceived reality.
Right.
He is utilizing the art form not just to sound tough, but to vocalize his profound, paralyzing distrust of a system he genuinely believes is actively maliciously targeting him.
And here is where the story shifts from a musical analysis to something much darker. Because this isn't just an artistic exercise for Philfi.
No, it's not.
The lyrics aren't just floating in the digital ether. They are tied to a massive real-world forensic and legal battle. The digital persona of Philfi, the anti-establishment rapper, has collided head-on with the absolute crushing weight of the federal government.
So let's open the dossier.
Before we unpack the specifics of this document, we must establish our framework. We need to be absolutely clear here to you, the listener, as we navigate this.
Absolutely. Neutral ground.
We are looking at a legal dossier that contains highly charged, contradictory, and severe political narratives. We are not taking the side of the state, nor are we endorsing the defense's claims.
Right.
Our purpose is simply to lay out exactly what the documents claim, impartially, step by step, to understand how a digital persona is litigated in a physical court.
Impartiality is key here. Let's look at the state's narrative first, because it is heavy.
It is.
According to the forensic dossier provided in our sources, the Australian Federal Police and Victoria Police are running a joint operation designated as Operation Avalate Isle.
Under the purview of this operation, they have explicitly labeled Filthy a far-right extremist.
He is not being treated as a musician. He is being treated as a threat to national security.
Yeah, he is facing severe federal and state charges, including advocating force or violence against groups, the public display of prohibited Nazi symbols, and systematic stalking or intimidation.
That is the profile constructed by law enforcement. It paints a picture of a dangerous, radicalized individual. But the forensic defense narrative presented in that exact same dossier constructs a reality that is almost unimaginably different.
It really is night and day.
The defense describes Philip James Simpson not as a terrorist mastermind, but as a 41-year-old Aboriginal man who has been diagnosed with autism level 3 and severe complex post-traumatic stress disorder.
CPTSD.
Right. The dossier states that this CPTSD stems from horrific childhood trauma and, alarmingly, alleged prior state-sanctioned torture.
And the defense dossier makes incredibly heavy structural accusations against the government's methods. It claims the state actively weaponized his disability and his poverty against him.
It specifically alleges that government agencies, Services Australia, and the National Disability Insurance Agency, or NDIA, used his disability pension as a honeypot to entrap him.
This is a crucial concept to break down because it shows how bureaucratic systems interact with targeted individuals.
Wait, I need you to explain the mechanics of that. I thought the NDIA was a support system designed to help people with disabilities.
It's supposed to be.
How does a defense lawyer argue that a welfare system operates as a honeypot trap? How does that actually work in practice?
It is a terrifying argument about how bureaucracy can be inverted. The defense posits that when an individual is reliant on the state for their sheer physical survival, their housing, their food, their medical care, the state has absolute leverage.
Okay.
The honeypot mechanism, as alleged, works by creating an unavoidable paper trail. To receive his pension, he must attend mandated appointments, communicate with specific government portals, and utilize specific services.
Meaning they always know where he is.
Exactly. This creates a highly predictable matrix of his physical locations, his financial transactions, and his psychological state.
Right.
The defense is essentially arguing that the intelligence agencies use the algorithmic flags within the welfare system not to support him, but to monitor him, geographically tether him, and eventually spring a trap, allegedly breaking the Privacy Act in the process by sharing his medical and financial data across law enforcement branches.
So the very system keeping him alive is the tether the police use to hunt him. That is dystopian.
It really is.
And this brings us to how the defense tries to protect him in court. This is where the concept of the avatar becomes a literal legal defense strategy.
Right, the satirical defense.
The dossier argues that the actions the state has deemed extremist are actually heavily decontextualized elements of a satirical shock comedy persona. The defense states that the channel, Filthy GDC owner 18+, is nothing more than a comedy outlet that utilizes green screens to create absurd scenarios.
It is the Filthy Frank defense, applied in a federal court. Filthy himself explicitly told the police during interviews, "Everything I do is of comedic purposes." But the defense goes even further, recontextualizing the specific physical charges medically.
How so?
Well, the state points to a video and claims they see a prohibited Nazi salute which carries heavy criminal penalties. The defense counters by bringing in the autism level 3 diagnosis.
Oh, I see.
They categorize that specific physical movement medically as an autistic motor pattern, describing the movements as biblical gestures and self-soothing attacks, rather than a coherent political ideology.
This raises such a terrifying question about the friction between our online behavior and the rigid frameworks of the law.
It does.
If you build an entire brand on being filthy, anti-system, and relentlessly offensive, at what precise moment does the algorithm or the government intelligence analyst stop seeing the joke and start seeing a legitimate target?
That's the million-dollar question.
We saw George Miller voluntarily walk away from Filthy Frank because the persona was destroying his vocal cords and giving him seizures. Filthy is trying to use his persona to fight back against the system, but the result is that federal tactical units are kicking in his door.
And the physical consequences for Filthy are immediate and devastating. The dossier notes that during the execution of warrants, police seized his shirt printing press and medical marijuana.
Now, to the police, they're seizing the assets of an extremist.
Right. But the defense argues that they just confiscated the man's primary psychological coping mechanisms and his only legitimate small-scale business tools.
Just taking his livelihood.
Yeah, they removed his ability to soothe his autism and his ability to make a living without providing proper receipts.
And the ultimate goal for Philphi, according to the Now section of the dossier, is heartbreakingly small in scope. He isn't trying to overthrow the government.
No, not
He's planning a revolution. He's actively fighting for what he terms medical exile in Da Nang, Vietnam. He just wants to act as a provider for his partner and her teenage son.
just wants to live.
He wants to escape the system entirely. He wants to take his physical body out of the jurisdiction where his digital avatar is being hunted.
Which brings us to a grim, necessary realization. Filthy's rap lyrics speak of systemic abuse, of wiped body cams, and of a profound existential fear of the police.
Yeah, we talked about that.
But to understand why those specific fears exist in the geographic context of Queensland and Victoria, to understand the blood and guts reality that fuels this underground hip-hop.
We have to look at the inquest.
Exactly. We have to look at one of the most chilling documents in our sources,
Mm-hmm.
the coronial inquest into the death of Tyson Lee Jessen.
This is where the abstract concepts of avatars and anti-establishment lyrics hit absolute fatal reality. We are looking at the April 2022 findings from the Coroner's Court of Queensland.
And the facts of this case read like a tension-fueled thriller.
We need to set the scene meticulously. Tyson Lee Jessen was a 28-year-old man who had crossed state lines coming to Queensland from Victoria. He carried with him an extensive, highly violent criminal history. He had previously served a sentence for a horrific arson attack where a victim was literally set on fire.
Awful.
By November 2018, he was actively wanted by Victoria Police for an armed robbery he committed alongside 2 co-offenders.
The intelligence profile the police had on Jessen flagged him as an incredibly high-risk individual. The Victorian police had specific intelligence suggesting he was currently in possession of a Glock handgun.
So they knew he was armed.
Furthermore, he had allegedly expressed a clear intent to produce a firearm to actively provoke a deadly confrontation with police in order to avoid arrest. The fugitive task force was actively hunting him.
Through rigorous intelligence gathering, police located him. He was residing in the Red Bank area and was tracked attending a World Gym in Ipswich.
Because of his violent history and the strong belief that he was carrying a loaded firearm, standard patrol officers were not dispatched.
Makes sense.
The Special Emergency Response Team, CERT, the heavily armed tactical unit, was tasked with executing the arrest at the gym.
You can imagine the sheer adrenaline and tension of that moment. The CERT operatives move into the gym, they execute the arrest.
Right.
But during the takedown, Jessen immediately complains of severe chest pain and difficulty breathing. He is claiming cardiac symptoms. So the protocol shifts. He is transported by the Queensland Ambulance Service to the Ipswich Hospital.
This creates a highly volatile situation. He is an acute inpatient, but he is also a high-risk prisoner under police guard in a public hospital.
A dangerous mix.
On the morning of November 10th, 2018, due to standard shift rotations, a critical vulnerability occurs. For a brief period, Jessen is left alone in the hospital room with a single officer, Senior Constable Richardson.
The coroner's report details the absolute chaos of what happens next. Jessen makes his move. He attempts to violently escape from police custody.
He attacks the female officer, and a desperate, close-quarters struggle ensues. The report is clear.
Yeah.
Jessen was actively trying to rip her service revolver from her holster during the fight.
It is a life-or-death struggle over a loaded weapon in a hospital room. And in the chaotic climax of that struggle, Mr. Jessen is shot by the police officer. He dies from his wounds.
The subsequent internal investigations, as detailed in the inquest, concluded that the officers involved complied with all relevant legislation and use of force policies. They faced no disciplinary action, as the use of lethal force was deemed necessary to prevent Jessen from acquiring the firearm.
It is an incredibly heavy, dark document. It is just raw tragedy and violence. But why is this specific inquest crucial to our understanding of the avatars and the music we've been dissecting?
It is crucial because it removes the metaphor. This inquest represents the grim, undeniable physical reality of the system that artists like Filthy and DOBY are reacting to.
Ah, I see.
When they write their lyrics, this is the environment they are referencing. It isn't abstract paranoia. The interactions between individuals flagged by the state and the tactical police units carry extreme, immediate life-or-death stakes.
It proves that the environment producing these anti-establishment personas is a powder keg. When DOBW raps about deaths in custody, or when Filthy's AI-generated lyrics scream about the fear of the tactical units kicking in the glass.
Documents like the Jessen inquest fuel that exact paralyzing distrust.
The Jessen case is the physical bedrock of the digital outrage. It is the reason the avatars are armed with such aggressive rhetoric.
We have journeyed through some incredibly intense variations of survival today. We looked at digital survival in the blocky world of Minecraft where authenticity was rewarded.
Yes, we did.
We looked at artistic rebirth by shedding a toxic persona that was destroying a man's nervous system. We examined legal entrapment over satirical content and the literal physical death in a hospital room.
It's been quite the ride.
To round out our deep dive into the concept of fetish, we need to look at one final, starkly contrasting variation of survival in the media landscape.
Let's step entirely out of the gutter, away from the police raids and the hospital struggles, and step into the absolute pinnacle of the media bubble. I want to introduce you to Philippa Sage.
Philippa Sage operates in a universe completely alien to Phil Watson, or Phil Bossy. She's an author who wrote a memoir detailing her 12 years working as a personal assistant, gopher, and ultimate fixer for the incredibly famous Top Gear trio.
Jeremy Clarkson, Richard Hammond, and James May.
That's them.
And the sources paint a picture of an environment that is pure, insulated luxury. They describe the world she managed as an absolute bubble. We are talking about massive astronomical budgets funded by the state broadcaster.
It's huge money.
They traveled like untouchable rock stars to 18 different countries, performing massive live shows for over 2 million fans in arenas spanning from Norway to New Zealand to Australia.
Her primary job description was managing chaos, but we have to recognize that this was a highly funded, state-approved, mainstream brand of chaos.
Very different kind of chaos.
The sources talk about them relaxing in five-star luxury resorts, entertaining themselves with exclusive pool parties, jet skis, and private motorboat cruises. She was employed to manage the extravagant, often unpredictable lives of what the text affectionately calls these stupid, naughty, and incredibly talented boys.
The contrast is giving me whiplash, frankly. Think about the other creative survival stories we've just unpacked. Think about Phil Watson, sitting alone in a modest room for 5 years, stressing over every single step in a video game just to maintain his hobby.
Right.
Think about George Miller literally destroying his vocal cords, suffering seizures, and ruining his physical health just to get the YouTube algorithm to notice him before he was forced to quit.
And think about the local, completely unfunded grassroots arts scene that is mentioned in the very same SLAP mag issue that reviews Philippa's book.
Yes. The SLAP mag source provides this brilliant, poignant window into what local culture looks like without a BBC budget. You have the Click Click Collective running something called the Asper Olympics at the Asperifest in Evesham.
The Asper Olympics.
It is described as it's a knockout meets school sports day, featuring a character board painted by a local named Kevin Robinson. It's innocent, it's playful, it's madcap capers in a field.
Wholesome, really.
You have independent filmmakers like Pablo Raybould scraping together resources to make an indie horror comedy called The Snarling, using local talent in the Midlands. You have guys writing into the magazine reminiscing about playing guitar in the 90s in jangly, forgotten indie pop bands called Smedley and Jackpot.
That grassroots reality, the Asper Olympics, the local indie bands, is the polar opposite of the Top Gear bubble.
Completely.
Philippa Sage, who eventually formed a personal relationship with Jeremy Clarkson and officially became a couple with him in 2011, went on to work on the Grand Tour for Amazon. She survived, thrived, and ultimately secured a lucrative book deal by enabling and managing mainstream, high-budget rebellion.
And this is where I really have to push back on the nature of how society judges behavior. Look at the dichotomy we've established.
Okay, I'm with you.
It seems like if you have the massive institutional budget of the BBC or Amazon behind you, your naughty and stupid behavior is celebrated as roguish charm. It gets you a book deal, global fame, and luxury resorts.
Sure.
But if you are an Aboriginal guy named Philphi with a green screen and a modest house in Queensland, making filthy anti-establishment content with zero budget, your behavior gets you a federal dossier, your equipment seized, and charges of far-right extremism.
It's quite the contrast.
I have to ask, is the ultimate difference between being celebrated as a cultural maverick and being hunted as a domestic terrorist simply a matter of funding and state approval?
That is a piercing, uncomfortable observation, but the mechanics of society suggest you are right. The Top Gear bubble is entirely sanctioned by the establishment. It is safe rebellion.
Safe rebellion, yeah.
It is naughty behavior that generates massive capital for the networks. Philphi's rebellion, or even the raw documentary-style accusations of DWBAY, challenges the core authority and legitimacy of the state itself. The tolerance any society has for a chaotic persona is directly, mathematically correlated to how much capital that persona generates versus how much systemic authority it questions.
So, after 15 hours in the research cave, pulling all these wildly divergent threads together, what have we ultimately found? The individuals operating under the banner of feces?
What's the verdict?
Whether it is FH1LZA finding authentic fame through the tragic loss of a digital block world, Filthy Frank screaming into a webcam until his body broke before finding peace as Joji,
Or Filthy fighting a terrifying federal matrix with an AI-assisted boom-bap beat.
or Philippus Sage managing the luxury state-sponsored bubble of Top Gear. They all represent the exact same modern struggle. They're all desperately trying to control their own narrative in a world that wants to define them.
They are. And tracing their stories leaves us with a final, deeply provocative thought to consider for you listening.
Let's hear it.
In today's hyper-connected, relentlessly documented world, you don't just leave behind one singular legacy. You leave behind a multitude of footprints.
Oh, that's true.
There is the curated digital footprint you meticulously build for your fans and followers. There is the cold, legal, bureaucratic footprint that the state and its algorithms build against you in its databases. And there's the gritty, physical footprint you leave on the earth and the people immediately around you.
Which brings us right back to those muddy waters of identity we talked about at the very beginning. When you look at a driver's license, it's clean, it's binary.
Right.
But when you look at a life, it is a complex, contradictory matrix of personas and avatars. The question we leave you with is this. When you're finally gone, which of those footprints, the digital ghost you curated, the legal dossier the state compiled, or the physical reality you lived, will the world ultimately decide is the real you?
It is a question without a clean, comforting answer. But it's the reality we all have to face as we continue to build our lives both online and off.
It really is. Thank you for joining us on this exhaustive, bespoke deep dive. We hope this exploration encourages you to look a little closer and question the narratives you read, watch, and stream every single day.
G-Day.
Until next time,
Grab
keep
a cuppa
diving.
and settle in. Because, well, you are joining us for a deep dive today that is just absolute madness.
Yeah, madness is probably the most accurate legal term for it, honestly.
Right. Because I want you to imagine something for a second. Imagine standing by the side of a rural road down in Crib Point, just staring at your phone.
Waiting for a call.
Exactly.
Hmm.
You're waiting for this routine call from CenturyLink, a call that is, supposed to restore your canceled disability pension. And you've been told the exact time.
12:40 p.m. on the dot.
12:40 p.m. And you've gone to this specific spot just to get decent reception.
Yeah.
But the phone never rings. Instead, the Australian Federal Police and Victoria Police just swarm you.
They ambush you, cuff you, and drag you away.
Yeah. So how does a basic welfare check turn into a multi-agency ambush? Today, we are forensically unpacking a legal labyrinth that asks exactly that. We've got a stack of sources on the table today that is thicker than a phone book.
And probably twice as heavy, mate. It's hard yakka just getting through the index.
It is. We are looking at the case of a bloke named Philip James Simpson. And the paper trail we have here is, well, it's comprehensive.
To put it mildly, we have official court transcripts, police records of interview, raw internal agency data logs, NDIS advocacy letters, and
don't forget the big one.
right, the massive, highly detailed defense strategy dossier. The defense team themselves actually dubbed it the nuclear package.
The nuclear package. I love that.
Yeah.
So our mission today, just to be clear, isn't to play judge or jury.
No, not at all. We aren't here to decide who belongs in the clink.
Exactly. We're going to put these court hearings under the microscope. We're going to listen to the covert phone calls, trace these wild allegations of interagency data traps, and just see how the whole kit and caboodle connects.
But we do need to give you, the listener, a very strong disclaimer right off the bat.
Yeah, please do.
This deep dive involves highly charged allegations on both sides. I mean, extremely charged.
We're talking serious stuff here.
Absolutely. The Crown is alleging severe police intimidation by the defendant, highly offensive online behavior, and genuine security risks to officers.
Right. And on the flip side of that coin, the defense is alleging state-sanctioned torture, institutional conspiracy.
Perjury by federal agencies.
Yeah, perjury, and the deliberate weaponization of a man's psychiatric disability. So we must explicitly state that we are not taking sides here.
Never. We are strictly impartial. We are just laying out the facts and the arguments exactly as they are presented in this raw source material.
We're just the tour guides through the paper trail today. So I reckon we should start by looking at the man at the center of the storm.
Philip James Simpson.
Yeah. To understand why a bloke gets ambushed waiting for a CenturyLink call, we have to understand his foundation. Who is he?
Well, according to the files, Simpson was born in September 1983. He is an Aboriginal man who relies on a disability support pension, or
Yeah.
DSP. And to really grasp this case, we have to look very closely at his medical profile. It is heavily documented here in the psychiatric and NDIS functional capacity assessments.
And mate, looking at this file, his medical history is no walk in the park.
No, it is highly complex. His primary diagnoses include level 3 autism spectrum disorder.
Now, hang on a sec. If I understand the diagnostic criteria right,
Mhm.
level 3 that indicates a need for very substantial support, right?
Correct. It is the highest support tier. We are talking about severe deficits in verbal and nonverbal social communication skills.
So extreme difficulty coping with unexpected changes to his routine.
Precisely. For someone with level 3 autism, restricted, repetitive behaviors markedly interfere with their functioning in all spheres of life,
Which means if you introduce sudden high-stress disruption
like a police raid.
or a sudden loss of financial support, yeah.
Exactly. An individual with this profile may experience profound autonomic distress. But here's the thing, the autism is only his baseline.
Right, there's a lot more in the dossier.
The medical documents detail that he also suffers from complex post-traumatic stress disorder, CPTSD.
Which is heavy.
Very. Alongside borderline and antisocial personality disorders and a documented history of polysubstance use disorder.
Now, that CPTSD diagnosis, that's crucial here. Because unlike standard PTSD, which usually comes from, a single traumatic event like a car crash.
Or a combat incident, yes.
Yeah, complex PTSD develops from chronic, prolonged trauma, usually situations where the victim feels completely trapped over a long period.
The clinical literature states that it completely rewires the brain's threat detection system, the amygdala.
Right, so people with CPTSD, they often suffer from severe emotional dysregulation, hypervigilance.
An exaggerated startle response. They basically live in a state of permanent psychological siege.
Struth, so you have a brain that is literally constantly scanning for threats.
And is prone to autonomic, involuntary panic responses when cornered. Now, you layer that on top of level 3 autism.
Right.
You have an individual who is profoundly vulnerable in any confrontational situation.
And law enforcement encounters are inherently unpredictable and coercive.
They are essentially a worst-case scenario for this specific psychological profile.
Right. But, and this is where we have to look at the Crown's perspective. The prosecution looks at Simpson, and they don't primarily see a vulnerable bloke navigating a complex disability.
No, they see a habitual offender.
Yeah. The sources detail a massive criminal history up in Queensland. We're talking a span of 20 years, from roughly 2005 to 2022.
A very long, established paper trail.
It's a rap sheet as long as your arm, fair dinkum. Public nuisance, drug possession, obstructing police, contravening domestic violence orders.
And from a strictly prosecutorial standpoint, that 20-year history establishes a definitive pattern.
Right. The Crown views his current actions down in Victoria through the lens of that Queensland history.
To them, he is a known quantity, someone who consistently flouts the law and requires strict judicial management.
But the defense dossier, and this is where it gets really heavy, they provide an advocacy letter from his NDIS support worker and documents from the Trauma Foundation.
Yes, and they present a completely different origin story for all that criminal friction.
They point to a specific event in Queensland as the absolute genesis of his severe CPTSD. And I have to say, reading this part of the brief, it is just bloody harrowing.
It is an incredibly disturbing allegation regarding his treatment in a Queensland public hospital.
Walk us through it.
According to the NDIS support worker statement, Simpson was shackled to a hospital bed for 9 consecutive days.
9 days shackled. Fair dinkum, why?
Well, the defense claims it was because he was posting satirical, dark humor videos online, videos that allegedly bruised the egos of the local police.
So the advocacy letter details that during this entire 9-day involuntary confinement, armed police officers were permanently stationed by his bedside.
Yes. And the most severe allegation in this entire section is that these officers routinely refused to unlock his shackles to even allow him to stand up and use the bathroom.
It's truth.
The defense explicitly labels this event. They do not call it standard police procedure. They call it state-sanctioned torture.
State-sanctioned torture and intentional degradation.
Designed, they argue, to break him psychologically.
Now, look, I've got to push back here for a second.
Mm.
Because this is exactly where a magistrate is going to start asking the hard questions.
Of course.
I mean, I get that being shackled to a bed for over a week and denied bathroom access sounds like an absolute nightmare. It would traumatize anyone.
Deeply.
But with a rap sheet spanning 2 decades, 20 years of dodging the cops, public nuisance, drug charges. How does a court separate genuine involuntary trauma responses from actual calculated criminal intent?
That is the million-dollar question.
It sounds like a total dog's breakfast for a judge to sort out.
It is the central tension of this entire case. In legal terms, you are asking how the court untangles maladaptive coping mechanisms from mens rea.
Mens rea being the mental state of intending to commit a crime.
Exactly. The defense is arguing a direct causal link. They say his CPTSD was forged by being brutalized and stripped of his autonomy by the police system.
So when he is confronted by that same system today, his reactions are involuntary panic responses.
Not calculated criminal menace. Yes.
But the Crown would argue, right, that having a trauma background doesn't give you a blank check to break the law.
No, is not.
You can't just waive a medical certificate to excuse aggressive behavior towards officers.
The Crown argues that while his history may be relevant for sentencing mitigation, it absolutely does not absolve him of criminal liability for his present actions.
Right.
And this fundamental disconnect, whether he is a calculated offender or a profoundly traumatized victim reacting involuntarily, it colors every single interaction we are about to discuss.
Because it's that exact trauma, that deep-seated systemic terror of police taking his autonomy, that ignites the current powder keg in Victoria.
It is the spark.
Let's look at how this whole Victorian situation actually kicked off. Because it involves a Telegram channel, a confiscated shirt press, and a truly bizarre defense involving a Netflix show.
Yes, the catalyst for the Victorian charges centers around a Telegram channel that Simpson ran. It was called Philfy.
Philfy, yeah.
According to the police interview transcripts, this channel had 252 followers.
Not exactly a massive broadcast network.
No, very niche. And Simpson vehemently claims that the content he posted was strictly 18-plus comedy.
A dark political satire.
He claims it was a coping mechanism for his trauma.
But the Victorian cops definitely didn't see the humor in it, did they?
They did not. In October 2024, Victoria police raid his house.
And this is where the defense says things went completely off the rails.
Simpson claims that during this raid, a detective senior constable named Ryan Hopkins unlawfully seized his property.
And didn't even provide a receipt.
Correct. And it wasn't just random electronic gear. They took a shirt press.
Now, Simpson says this shirt press was a vital hobby tool. He used it for his small clothing business, Black Sheep Clothing.
But more importantly than the business aspect, he explicitly states in the documents that running this business was a highly structured suicide prevention mechanism.
So it was the routine that kept his mental health stable.
Yes. When you view that seizure through the clinical lens of level 3 autism, where routine is paramount to psychological stability,
Right.
and CPTSD, where the unmitigated taking of property by armed police mirrors his previous trauma in Queensland.
The psychological impact is just catastrophic.
He felt he was being unlawfully targeted and robbed by the state yet again. He experienced a massive trauma response.
So he retaliated.
He retaliated hard.
He began calling Detective Hopkins' work landline, leaving furious voicemails. We have the transcripts right here on the desk, and mate, they are intense.
Highly aggressive.
He calls the detective a faggot. He demands the immediate return of his property and his medical marijuana within 72 hours.
He calls the seizure completely unconstitutional.
But then he ends the tirade with a very specific, aggressive threat. He says, and I quote, "Cunts, or I'll follow you home."
Now, from a purely statutory perspective, leaving a voicemail on a police officer's official work phone. In the official record of interview, Simpson states, and I will quote directly from the transcript, "What's the show called that I was watching?" There's a cop in that I'm referring to every time. His last name's Hopkins in it as well. Stranger Things.
Stranger Things.
He asserts that the police have, quote, got it confused, and that his aggressive rants were actually directed at Chief Hopper.
Or a character he conceptualizes as Hopkins, the fictional police chief from the popular Netflix science fiction show. Mate, when I read that in the source material, I nearly spat my coffee all over the documents.
It is highly unorthodox.
Claiming you were threatening a fictional TV cop from Indiana instead of the actual Victorian detective whose voicemail you're leaving the message on.
Yeah.
It's like a bloke trying to talk his way out of a speeding ticket by telling the highway patrol his Holden Commodore is actually a time machine.
It sounds absurd to a layperson.
It's either a brilliantly cynical, sovereign citizen-style loophole he's trying to exploit, or it is the most desperate, dodgy stretch imaginable.
Well, if we analyze it through the clinical framework of level 3 autism, there is a documented phenomenon of extreme literalism and hyperfixation.
Okay, so how does that work here?
Sometimes individuals on the spectrum can blur the lines between a piece of media they are heavily fixated on and their real-world communication.
Like scripting.
Exactly. They might use scripts or scenarios from television to express their own real-world distress.
So the defense might argue it's a manifestation of his disability, a kind of echolalia or scripted response to stress.
That is the clinical argument, yes. However, while a psychologist might find that fascinating, a magistrate in a criminal court is highly unlikely to accept it.
Yeah, I'd imagine not.
Threatening to follow a real flesh-and-blood Victorian detective home claiming that was actually a nuanced critique of a fictional character is a massive hurdle.
Especially since the context of the call demanding the return of a seized shirt press firmly roots the threat in reality.
Precisely. The context defeats the media fixation argument legally.
Struth, you'd have to have some front to try and push that Stranger Things angle in court.
Indeed.
But the voicemails, as aggressive as they are just the prelude. The real meat of this case, where the source material reads less like a local court dispute and more like a federal spy thriller,
Is the arrest itself?
yeah, how the police actually managed to track Simpson down to arrest him for those voicemails. This is where the defense alleges a massive, coordinated bait and switch.
The Centralink trap.
Let's dive into that, because this section of the dossier introduces severe allegations of abusive process and entrapment.
Following the police raid and what he perceived as ongoing harassment, Simpson travels overseas.
To Thailand and Vietnam.
Yes. And the defense documents describe this not as fleeing jurisdiction, but as medical exile.
Medical exile.
Uh,
A necessary, desperate retreat to stabilize his severe CPTSD away from the constant trigger of Victorian police.
But while he is over in Asia trying to lay low and get his head straight, his disability support pension gets canceled.
Now, Centrelink, or Services Australia, they cancel welfare payments for administrative reasons all the time, right?
Routinely, yes. For failure to report, missed appointments being overseas too long.
But the defense dossier alleges this wasn't a bureaucratic glitch. They claim this was a deliberate, calculated tactic of financial strangulation
They argue the state intentionally cut off his lifeline to starve him out.
to force him back to Australian soil so the cops could grab him.
And to substantiate this claim, the defense points heavily to the timeline of his return.
Walk us through that timeline.
Simpson returns to Australia voluntarily on August 26, 2025.
Voluntarily.
Yes. And the defense argues that this voluntary return completely torpedoes the Crown's standard argument that he is a flight risk.
I mean, their logic is simple. If he were genuinely fleeing justice to avoid these charges, why would he willingly board a flight that lands directly back in the jurisdiction of the police hunting him?
It is a strong logical inference.
And the welcome home he gets is pretty rough. As soon as he steps off the plane, Australian Border Force officers allegedly pull him aside at the airport.
The ABF intervention.
Yeah. The defense claims they coerce him into handing over the password to his iTel mobile phone. They tell him that if he doesn't comply, they will seize the device entirely.
And Simpson, being the hypervigilant individual he is, secretly records this entire audio interaction.
Of course he does. But that airport shakedown is just the appetizer. The main course is what happens next with his welfare payments.
Upon returning to Victoria, Simpson's immediate priority is survival.
Naturally.
He contacts Centrelink to rectify the cancellation and get his disability support pension reinstated.
And Centrelink eventually schedules a highly specific phone appointment for him.
The appointment is set for September 10th, 2025 at exactly 12:40 p.m.
Right. And he is instructed to wait at a specific designated location in Crib Point to ensure he has reception to receive this crucial call.
So you have a disabled man, financially desperate, doing exactly what the government tells him to do.
He goes to Crib Point. He's standing by the side of the road, staring at his phone, waiting for it to ring so he can afford to eat.
But Centrelink doesn't call it 12:40 p.m.
Instead, the Australian Federal Police and Victoria Police swoop in, they ambush him, and they arrest him right there on the spot.
And the detail that the defense uses to anchor their claim of a conspiracy is the financial aftermath of that day.
This is the kicker.
The dossier highlights that just 4 days after this dramatic arrest, Centrelink administratively reinstates his DSP.
And they process $8,400 in back pay into his account.
Which means they admitted they owed him the money all along.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The defense argues that the prompt reinstatement and massive back pay prove he was always legally eligible for the pension.
Therefore, the initial cancellation and the highly specific September 10th phone appointment were never about welfare administration.
They allege it was nothing more than a coordinated trap, a bait-and-switch designed by intelligence units to lure an unpredictable target to a geolocated drop point for a tactical arrest.
It is a profound allegation of state overreach.
Now, hang on a sec, mate. Because if that is true, we are talking about a massive breach of trust.
Remember.
If you are listening to this, you know the welfare system is supposed to be a safety net. Are you telling me the police can legally use someone's disability pension, their literal lifeline, to survive, as a fishing lure to drag them into an ambush?
It raises severe ethical and legal questions.
Surely there are laws against entrapment like that.
Yeah.
What about Ridgway versus the Queen? Doesn't that high court case stop cops from creating crimes to catch people?
That is a very astute connection to make. The defense is indeed relying heavily on the broad principles explored in Ridgway versus the Queen.
Right.
However, we need to be precise about how Ridgway works in a statutory context. Ridgway primarily deals with situations where law enforcement actively creates a crime.
Like supplying illegal narcotics to a suspect who wouldn't have otherwise had access to them.
Exactly, and then arresting them for it. The High Court ruled that courts have the discretion to exclude evidence obtained through illegal or highly improper police conduct if it compromises the integrity of the justice system.
Okay, so in Ridgway, the cops basically brought the drugs into the country themselves to catch the smuggler.
Yes.
But in Simpson's case, the police aren't creating the crime. The voicemails to the detective already happened.
Correct. They are creating the opportunity for the arrest using a fake welfare appointment.
So it isn't entrapment in the strictest Ridgway sense of creating the offense.
No. Instead, the defense argues it is a gross abuse of process.
Right.
They contend that exploiting a citizen's psychiatric disability and statutory right to Social Security to effect a tactical arrest is fundamentally oppressive.
And the true smoking gun the defense wields to prove this interagency collusion revolves around a dispute over a simple three-letter acronym.
LPS.
LPS. Unpack this FOI request for us, because this is where the paper trail gets really sticky and honestly a bit scary for anyone who uses government services.
Well, Simpson, acting on his suspicions about how the police knew exactly where he would be in Crib Point, submitted a Freedom of Information, or FOI, request to Services Australia.
He wanted his internal data logs.
Yes, and in the official, heavily redacted FOI decision provided to him, the Services Australia delegate explained away a specific flag on his file marked LPS.
And what did they say it meant?
The delegate claimed in writing that LPS stood for Local Peer Support.
Local peer support. Which sounds completely benign. Just a disabled bloke getting some local peer support for his complex needs. Nothing to see here.
Except Simpson's defense team managed to obtain the unredacted internal data logs.
Oh, wow.
And those raw documents explicitly show his file was escalated to a unit designated CIS LPS immediately after he made concerning comments online.
And in the internal nomenclature of Services Australia, LPS absolutely does not mean local peer support, does it?
No, it stands for the Loss Prevention and Security Team.
The Internal Fraud and Intelligence Branch. So the defense is arguing that a federal agency, CenturyLink, literally committed perjury on an official FOI response to cover their tracks.
They allege the agency lied about the acronym to hide a backdoor data-sharing pipeline between the NDIA, CenturyLink, and the police.
That is the core allegation.
Yes. The defense argues this pipeline completely bypasses the protections of the Privacy Act.
Now, under the Privacy Act, government agencies are generally prohibited from sharing your personal data, right?
Generally, yes. However, there is an exception for enforcement-related activities.
But to use that exception legally, agencies must meticulously log when they disclose information, what was disclosed, and to whom.
Exactly. There must be a transparent administrative trail.
So if you submit a FOI request to see who is looking at your MyGov data, how easy is it for an agency to legally hide behind a benign-sounding acronym like local peer support to mask the fact that they are feeding your live location to a police tactical unit?
If the defense's allegations are accurate, it suggests that the administrative firewalls protecting citizen data are highly porous.
They allege this wasn't a formal warrant process.
No, they call it a backdoor intelligence handover. Leveraging his disability needs to effect a physical arrest.
And the defense points out that this alleged systemic overreach and psychological pressure spilled directly into the interrogation room on the very day he was grabbed.
Which brings us to September 10th, 2025.
The day of the Crib Point ambush. We have the transcript of the record of interview, the ROI, conducted at the police station immediately following his arrest.
And reading this transcript, it is incredibly uncomfortable.
It really is. You have Detective Katie Dillon and Detective Chris Pham in the room with Simpson.
The transcript paints a vivid picture of a suspect in deep, acute psychological distress.
Remember his diagnoses: level 3, autism, and severe CPTSD.
Simpson repeatedly begs the detectives to stop the interview. He says, and this is a direct quote from the source material, "I don't know if it should be going on because of my mental health. My brain is too far gone."
My brain is too far gone.
He explicitly tells the officers he is suffering from impulse control problems at that exact moment.
Now, because he's an Aboriginal man, and because he's documented severe cognitive disabilities, the police can't just interrogate him alone, right?
Legally, no. They are required to have an independent third person, an ITP, in the room.
To protect his rights and make sure he understands what's happening?
Yes, to ensure procedural fairness.
So they have a bloke named Mike Bennett in the room, acting as the ITP. But mate, looking at the defense's breakdown of the transcript, this Mike Bennett is about as useful as a screen door on a submarine.
The defense is highly critical of his presence, yes.
They point out that he says absolutely nothing. He sits in complete silence while Simpson is having a visible meltdown and begging to stop the recording.
The role of an ITP is not merely decorative, it is a vital safeguard under the law.
Specifically governed by the Evidence Act and the Anunga Rules.
Correct. The Anunga Rules are a set of specific judicial guidelines established by the Supreme Court of the Northern Territory in 1976.
And they've heavily influenced police procedure nationwide.
They were designed to ensure that investigative interviews with Aboriginal persons are conducted fairly. They recognize severe power imbalances, language barriers, and cultural tendencies like gratuitous concurrence.
Gratuitous concurrence. That's where a suspect might just agree with whatever the police say to appease the authority figure and end the interaction, right?
Exactly. Just saying yes to make the pressure stop.
So how do the Anunga Rules actually work in practice? Do they dictate that the police have to pause the interview if the suspect is getting overwhelmed?
They do. The rules mandate that questions must be formulated carefully, avoiding leading questions.
Oh.
And crucially, they require the presence of a prisoner's friend, or ITP, whose job is to actively facilitate communication.
And intervene if the suspect is confused, fatigued, or distressed.
Yes. If a suspect explicitly states, "My brain is gone, I don't know if this should be going on," the ITP has an absolute duty to halt the proceedings to assess the suspect's welfare.
But in this transcript, Bennett does nothing. The detectives just keep pushing through Simpson's objections.
The interview continues uninterrupted.
How is any of the evidence they get from that interview admissible in a court of law? If the safeguard fails completely, shouldn't the evidence be thrown out?
That is the exact legal lever the defense is pulling. They are utilizing Sections 84 and 138 of the Evidence Act.
Break those down for us.
Section 84 deals with the exclusion of admissions influenced by violence, or in this specific case, oppressive conduct.
Right.
Section 138 gives the court the discretion to exclude evidence that was obtained improperly or in contravention of an Australian law.
If the desirability of admitting the evidence is outweighed by the undesirability of how it was obtained.
Precisely.
So the defense is arguing that because the police ignored his pleas to stop and the ITP failed his duty, everything Simpson says next is fruit of the poisonous tree.
Yes. If the process of obtaining the evidence was fundamentally tainted by oppression or a breach of procedural fairness, the resulting evidence must be excluded from trial to maintain the integrity of the judicial system.
But the Crown is hanging their hat on this specific interview.
They rely on it heavily.
They claim that during these interrogations, once his brain was quote-unquote too far gone, Simpson made massive, damning admissions.
Yes, the police summary of facts says he explicitly admitted to being a Nazi, that he hates Jews and wants them dead.
It's highly inflammatory stuff.
Yeah.
There's even a charge listed in the documents for intentionally display a Nazi symbol.
Though it should be noted that charge was eventually adjourned without conviction.
Right. But the defense vehemently denies the Crown's interpretation of those statements anyway.
In their forensic audit brief, the defense takes an incredibly aggressive stance. They claim the summary of facts was completely fabricated.
Or at least perjured by omission by the federal agent who drafted it.
That is a massive allegation to level at a law enforcement officer. Perjury.
It is.
Yeah.
But they argue that Simpson's rambling, disjointed statements were not a coherent confession of extremist neo-Nazi ideology.
No, they argue it was a textbook symptom of psychomotor retardation and a complete CPTSD autonomic collapse.
They claim he was essentially verbally flailing, using shocking language as a defense mechanism while trapped in an interrogation room.
An environment that perfectly mirrors his original trauma in the Queensland hospital.
So you have two entirely different realities again.
Once again.
The Crown saying he confessed to being a dangerous neo-Nazi, and the defense saying the cops literally cherry-picked words from a disabled bloke who was having a severe panic attack and spun it into a confession.
It is a complete standoff regarding the interpretation of the raw audio.
And that standoff marches right out of the interrogation room and into the courtroom, where the real legal battle lines are drawn.
And those courtroom battles, specifically the contentious bail hearings in December 2024 and April 2026, that is where we see the defense's legal strategy clash directly with judicial discretion.
Yeah, the source material highlights what the defense characterizes as severe, documented, apprehended bias emanating from the magistrate handling the case.
Let's define apprehended bias because it is crucial here.
Yeah, the magistrate does not come off looking great in the transcripts the defense has provided. Apprehended bias essentially means that a fair-minded observer looking at the judge's behavior would reasonably conclude they aren't being impartial, right?
That is the precise legal test. It's not about proving actual conscious bias in the judge's mind, which is almost impossible to establish.
Right, you can't read their thoughts.
Exactly. It's about the appearance of bias compromising the fairness of the hearing. And the defense dossier points to stark contradictions on the official audio record to make this claim.
The biggest contradiction is how the magistrate handles Simpson's history.
Yes, the Queensland charges.
In one hearing, the Crown tries to bring up those 20-year-old Queensland charges, the public nuisance and drug stuff from 2005.
And on the audio record, the magistrate verbally dismisses it.
He literally says, 20 years ago, I don't put much weight on them. He waves it off as irrelevant history.
But then, when it comes time to deliver the final formal ruling refusing to vary Simpson's strict bail conditions,
The magistrate does a total 180. He uses those exact same historic charges he just dismissed as the primary justification for keeping Simpson locked into heavy bail conditions.
that kind of documented contradiction on the record provides highly fertile ground for an appeal.
I mean, a judge cannot logically dismiss evidence as irrelevant and then pivot to using it as the foundation for a restrictive ruling.
Legally, no. But the procedural friction escalated significantly from there.
Simpson, realizing the magistrate was being hostile and contradictory, demanded written reasons for the bail refusal. He invoked Section 18A of the Bail Act.
And just to clarify for you, the listener, Section 18A is important because if you want to appeal a magistrate's bail decision to the Supreme Court,
You need the magistrate's written reasons to show the higher court exactly where the lower court got it wrong. You need the paper trail.
precisely. It is a statutory right designed to facilitate the appeals process. But according to the defense transcripts, this is where the magistrate engages in severe procedural evasion.
The defense claims the magistrate gets caught on a hot mic. The transcript shows Simpson demanding the written reasons under 18A, and the magistrate refuses to provide them right then and there.
He is recorded saying he will do it as an OT.
An OT, an overtime or offline transcript.
This essentially means he will draft the reasons later, off the official record, explicitly to avoid providing them immediately.
Which severely delays Simpson's ability to file his Supreme Court appeal.
The defense argues this OT maneuver was a deliberate tactic to obstruct justice.
Furthermore, the defense alleges the magistrate actively weaponized Simpson's psychiatric diagnoses against him to dismiss forensic evidence.
For instance, when Simpson presented his meticulously detailed audit of the police surveillance and the interagency data sharing,
The central link trap we discussed earlier, complete with the unredacted LPS documents.
yes, the magistrate didn't address the evidence legally, she pathologized it.
Right. He dismissed it on the record as mere paranoia that the authorities are out to get him.
So the magistrate takes a mathematically sound, documented audit of actual government overreach,
Points to Simpson's medical file and just says, nah, you're just crazy. Next.
which is incredibly dangerous territory for a judicial officer.
And then there is the dispute over the Vietnam request.
Simpson begs the court to alter his bail so he can return to Vietnam temporarily.
His stated reason is to care for his partner over there, who suffers from severe vestibular disease.
And the Crown stands up in open court and formally opposes the request.
stating they have no evidence whatsoever of any family ties or a partner in Vietnam. They imply he's just making it up to flee the country.
But the defense proves this Crown assertion is demonstrably false.
And they do it using the police's own evidence brief against them.
During the initial October raid, the police seized Simpson's phone. The defense points out that the police literally seized and logged photos of Simpson's girlfriend from that device.
Moreover, the official police running sheet, written by the investigating detective, contains a handwritten note that explicitly says, "Get number for Phil's girlfriend."
So the state possessed documented internal knowledge of his ties to Vietnam.
But the prosecutor stood up in court and denied that evidence existed to prevent him from getting bail.
That is wild.
It is a stark discrepancy.
But, mate, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go ahead.
Is it fair, dinkum, for a magistrate to block a Form 31 special mention just to protect the state, as the defense claims?
It's a strong accusation.
Or is it possible the magistrate is just exhausted? You see these cases where sovereign citizen types flood the court with hundreds of pages of pseudo-legal jargon demanding the judge read every line.
Yeah.
Do judges just lose patience and start shutting them down?
It is a highly valid question.
Yeah.
Magistrates in the local courts deal with an immense volume of cases daily.
Right.
Voluminous, highly complex filings from self-represented defendants can be exhausting and administratively burdensome to process. Fatigue is a real factor in the justice system.
But the requirement for judicial impartiality is absolute, regardless of the workload. You can't just ignore evidence because the paperwork is annoying. Exactly. Dismissing documented evidence of federal agency misconduct as mere paranoia simply because the defendant has a CPTSD diagnosis.
Is the textbook definition of apprehended bias?
It falls into a psychological hazard that the defense explicitly names the representativeness trap.
The representativeness trap.
Yes, where the judge is judging the person based on a clinical stereotype rather than evaluating the objective forensic evidence placed before the court.
Right. So knowing the magistrate is actively hostile and knowing the Crown is allegedly burying evidence about his girlfriend,
The defense realizes they can't just play standard defense.
they can't just argue about whether the voicemails were actually threatening. They decide to go fully nuclear.
Which brings us to the final act of this deep dive, the defense's nuclear package.
The Supreme Court final consolidated nuclear package. It is an incredibly aggressive, all-or-nothing legal strategy.
Instead of getting bogged down arguing over the minutia of the bail conditions or the specific wording of the telegram posts, the defense elevates the stakes entirely.
They are seeking a permanent stay of proceedings.
Now, a permanent stay sounds like hitting the ultimate delete button on a prosecution.
It sounds like the court is saying the foundation of the police work is too rotten to even hold a trial. Is it really that absolute?
It is exactly that absolute, and consequently, it is exceptionally rare for a Supreme Court to grant one.
Rare.
Very. A permanent stay of proceedings means the court completely and permanently halts the prosecution. It throws the entire case in the bin. The charges cannot be brought again.
To grant this, a judge must find that the conduct of the prosecution or the investigating agencies was so fundamentally flawed, illegal, or oppressive that allowing the trial to proceed would be a permanent stain on the integrity of the justice system itself.
The court basically says, we refuse to legitimize how you caught this guy.
Exactly. And the defense relies heavily on landmark high court precedents, like Walton versus Gardner and Williams versus Spots.
These precedents establish that proceedings can be stayed if they constitute a gross abuse of process.
Or if they are brought for an improper purpose that brings the administration of justice into disrepute.
I like to think of their strategy like playing a high-stakes game of Jenga.
Jenga, yeah.
The defense isn't trying to argue about the block at the very top of the tower. The aggressive voicemails to Detective Hopkins, they concede those exist.
Right.
Instead, they're trying to pull out the absolute bottom block, the Centralink data breach, the unlawful welfare trap, the history of torture.
They know that if they pull that bottom block out, the entire tower of the prosecution collapses. They call this the fusion doctrine.
The fusion doctrine is a brilliant conceptual framing of the fruit of the poisonous tree argument.
They argue that because the initial intelligence gathering, the Centralink data breach, masking as local peer support, was illegal.
Every single subsequent act by the state is infected.
The raid, the airport coercion, the interviews without a functioning ITP, the biased bail hearings.
They argue it is all a legal nullity born from an original sin.
And to execute this strategy, To deliver the final blow to the prosecution's tower, they introduce what they term their kill shot evidence.
This is a medical document dated January 13th, 2026, written by a Dr. Mark Daly at First People's Health.
And what this letter says is fascinating.
Dr. Daly explicitly states that due to Simpson's severe complex PTSD and autism, quote, he cannot hang around waiting in queues without suffering severe autonomic panic and verbal outbursts.
And we must analyze how the defense applies that medical fact to the legal conditions imposed on Simpson.
It is a brilliant legal checkmate.
Look at the bail conditions the magistrate placed on him. Simpson is required to report to a police station in person 3 days a week.
And what does reporting to a police station involve?
It involves standing in a waiting room, waiting in queues, at a police station surrounded by armed officers.
For a bloke who was allegedly shackled to a bed and tortured by armed police and has a medical certificate stating he cannot wait in queues without having a panic attack.
The defense uses Dr. Daly's letter to prove that the state's bail condition is medically impossible for him to comply with peacefully.
It is a profound argument. The defense is demonstrating that the state is mandating a condition that inherently triggers the disability.
It actually induces the exact threats and verbal outbursts that the police are subsequently charging him for.
They are effectively forcing him into a psychiatric crisis by law and then prosecuting him for the symptoms of that crisis.
It creates this inescapable paradox for the prosecution. You can't legally mandate a bloke to walk into a trigger zone and then lock him up when he gets triggered.
Exactly.
And just to put the absolute cherry on top of this nuclear package, the defense pulls out one last document.
It is the Australian Federal Police's own internal situation report from the day of the Crib Point ambush.
Sitrep number 4. Now remember, the Crown has been standing up in court swearing blind that Simpson is a massive security risk, a violent terror threat who needs strict bail.
But the AFP's own internal document says the SIU, the Special Investigations Unit on the ground that day, felt, and I quote directly, he did not feel like a threat at all.
He did not feel like a threat at all.
It is a devastating contradiction to leave hanging before a Supreme Court judge.
The state is presenting one narrative to the magistrate to ensure he remains under strict judicial control, painting him as a highly dangerous extremist.
But internally, the tactical officers assessing him on the ground are documenting him as a non-threat.
So when you stack it all up, when you combine the hidden AFP sitrep saying he's harmless, the alleged perjury over the LPS acronym at Centrelink, the medically impossible bail conditions forcing a panic attack, and the complete failure of the independent third person while he begs for his interview to stop,
The argument for a permanent stay becomes a massive headache for the Crown.
the defense is essentially arguing that the state manufactured a crime using the welfare system, weaponized a man's severe disability against him, and then lied on the paperwork to cover it all up.
It is a profoundly substantive argument for an abusive process.
Struth. Let's take a deep breath and recap this absolute roller coaster of a journey.
It has been a lot to cover.
We started with an Aboriginal man, heavily disabled with level 3 autism, allegedly shackled to a hospital bed in Queensland for 9 days over some satirical videos.
That severe trauma breeds a deep autonomic fear of the system.
Years later in Victoria, he tries to run an 18-plus Telegram comedy channel. The cops raid him, they take his suicide prevention shirt press without a receipt, and his trauma response kicks in.
He snaps, leaving furious voicemails.
He then tries to claim he was yelling at a fictional cop from Stranger Things. He flees to Asia for medical exile to escape the harassment.
Centrelink allegedly cuts his pension to starve him back home.
Australian Border Force shake him down for his phone passwords at the airport. Centrelink sets up a fake welfare appointment, and the federal police ambush him at Crib Point.
They interrogate him while his brain is, quote, too far gone.
The magistrate mocks his documented audit as paranoia, and now we are looking at a massive Supreme Court showdown where the defense is trying to use a nuclear package to burn the whole prosecution to the ground for gross government overreach.
It is fair dinkum madness from start to finish.
It really is.
But it is much more than madness. It is a profound case study in the intersection of severe disability administrative law and the unchecked expansion of police powers.
Yeah.
And as we conclude, I want to pivot from Philip Simpson's specific circumstances and ask you, the listener, to consider the broader implications of this precedent.
It affects everyone, really.
Consider the fragility of your own digital footprint. If you are on an NDIF plan, if you are receiving a disability support pension, or frankly, if you interact with any digital government service, how insulated are you really?
That's the real question.
If you suddenly become a person of interest to law enforcement, how easily can the administrative state share your live location, your specific medical vulnerabilities, and your financial lifelines with the police, entirely bypassing standard judicial warrants?
This case, particularly the LPS acronym dispute, suggests that the firewalls between welfare support and police surveillance intelligence might be dangerously paper-thin. That is a chilling thought, mate. We rely on safety nets like welfare, Medicare, and disability support to catch us when we fall. We hand over our most intimate medical and financial data, trusting it will be used to help us.
But what happens when the state decides to use that safety net as a dragnet?
Exactly. If the algorithms and the benign-sounding acronyms designed to provide local peer support can be flipped with a keystroke to hunt us, then who is actually protecting who? Have a think about that next time you tick "I agree" on a government privacy form or submit an FOI request. Because in the murky waters of interagency data sharing, it turns out the system holds all the cards, and they might just be playing a game you didn't even know you signed up for. Catch ya next time for another deep dive.
Welcome to today's deep dive, which is custom tailored just for you. So I want you to imagine getting a parking ticket in London, right? But you have passport proof that you were on a flight to Tokyo at that exact moment.
Right, which makes absolutely no sense.
Exactly. And that is the baseline of the case we are looking at today. It's a highly technical, mathematically driven legal document regarding a Mr. Philip James Simpson and the state of Victoria.
Yeah, and it is just a fascinating dispute.
It really is. And, just to be clear right up front, we are impartially reporting the claims within these documents. We are definitely not endorsing either side here. Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, to start, the state is prosecuting Simpson using this experimental test case framework based on his digital footprints.
Okay.
But the defense brings in the math, right? They use official border logs to prove Simpson was physically in Thailand and Vietnam when these domestic physical offenses supposedly happened. So mathematically, his guilt has a 0% probability.
Wait, really? But couldn't a digital footprint cross borders? I mean, my phone pings servers in London while I'm sitting right here.
It absolutely can. And that is exactly where the state committed what is called the prosecutor's fallacy. They basically conflated a digital threat with a physical presence.
Ah, okay, so they mixed up the digital and the physical.
Exactly. So because the passport logs prove he was offshore, it creates a spatiotemporal impossibility.
Wow, okay, so the physical impossibility is established, but there is also this really bizarre timing issue, right? Like this 144-hour window where multiple welfare agencies and the police all acted against Simpson.
Yes, and what's fascinating here is how Reichenbach's principle applies to that timing.
Remind me what that is.
Sure, it basically argues that if two independent events happen together, they usually share a root cause. The joint probability of these agencies acting against him independently within that tiny window is 10 to the power of negative 15.
That is 1 in a quadrillion, so it's less like a coincidence and more like a synchronized swimming routine.
That is a perfect way to describe it. They actually used social network analysis to prove that these agencies were acting as intentional brokers, essentially sharing data they really shouldn't have.
Right, which brings up the missing data. Because if they were coordinating like that, you'd think they would cover their tracks. I mean, there's a 34-page psychiatric report on him, but 6 pages are just conveniently missing.
Yeah, and those specific pages detail prior police torture.
Oh, wow, that is highly suspicious.
Right, and here the defense applies the hypergeometric distribution.
Let me guess, another probability model.
You guessed it. Basically, there is less than a 0.01% chance that this degradation was random.
So it wasn't just a clumsy filing error?
Exactly, someone stacked the deck. But they don't just rely on missing paper. They also analyzed acoustic waveforms from Simpson's interrogation.
Wait, they used audio of his voice?
They did, and the analysis revealed a statistically significant reduced vowel space in his speech.
I'm not sure I follow. A reduced vowel space.
Yeah, they used a metric called Hedges G, and it scored greater than 0.8, which is a massive clinical indicator. It proved severe PTSD-induced trauma, physically changed how he spoke.
That is wild.
It really is. And the defense argues this biological reality completely invalidates criminal intent. You literally cannot have criminal intent if your brain is paralyzed by trauma.
Which raises a huge question for me. Can objective biology legally overrule a written court transcript? because the state completely erased his trauma from the record by relying only on text.
That is the big question. And
Yeah.
if we connect this to the bigger picture, it demonstrates how raw data and acoustics can expose institutional flaws that traditional legal arguments might completely miss.
Right. Putting all these pieces together, Simpson's final complaint demands a $25 million lawsuit, plus a permanent stay of proceedings. I mean, independent tribunals have already found defective administration here.
Yeah, the math is really hard to ignore.
It really is. It leaves you with a pretty chilling thought to chew on. As algorithms increasingly flag citizens for law enforcement, could advanced mathematical defense strategies become our only reliable shield against automated government overreach? It's something for you to think about. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.